Blizzard dropped a big wowcast yesterday talking about our next patch, 11.1.7. Some controversial things happening in it. Differences with add-ons, stuff going on, changes to boss fights forever, and the title of our 11.1.7 patch. Let's get straight into this. The Legacy of Arathor. If you don't know what Arathor it is the Arathi Empire, right? It is the well-known and old human empire. This empire was the largest that the world had ever seen in terms of human empires. It was the joining of all of the warring human tribes, and this happened under the good old king. Yes, King Thoradin's reign. So King Thoradin united all the human tribes against the trolls. This was during the Troll War. This was around the same time that humans got to know the elves, right? The high elves at the time. Humans learned magic from these guys during the Troll Wars, as the elves themselves were dealing with the troll threats as well. And the fighting back of those trolls led to the uniting of the human empire. Of course, we know later down the line this empire falls apart, creating the giant human kingdoms that we know today of Lordaeron, Stormwind, and all the others. But all of the human ancestry and honestly glory goes back to this empire. And now we know with the people of Hallowfall, they come from an original sect kind of, or branch off of this Thoradin's empire, right? They were the ones essentially who followed this blazing light star or whatever to the other side of Azeroth and kind of continued their empire over there under the Light Emperor, who we still don't know who he is. So we're going to get a bunch of lore, evidently, about this Thoradin and the Arathor Empire, or the Arathi Empire as we really know it. It's going to be pretty interesting. I think it's going to tie a lot into Anduin. If you don't know, one of Thoradin's sons, one of the last lone heirs of Thoradin, is Anduin Lothar. Yeah, same name for a reason. Anduin was named after him. A lot of the descendants of Thoradin formed the Kingdom of Stormwind. You got the royals who branched off and formed Lordaeron, the magic dealers who formed Dalaran. So there's different sects of that empire that formed the different kingdoms. And I think Anduin's lore is going to be brought to the fold here with this 11.1.7 patch. Also, the Light Emperor and what could be happening beyond the War Within patch. So enough about the lore. Let's get into the controversial shit that fucking broke the internet yesterday, evidently. Blizzard intends to create in-game versions of popular add-ons, including boss mods, nameplates, damage meters, and more. I mean, I was just talking about this yesterday, literally saying if Blizzard gave me damage meters and Plater, I might be able to play this game without add-ons. Well, Blizzard is looking into doing that, but they're also not just looking into providing the add-ons that you would need to play this game, but limiting the ones that come from outside sources. Yeah, so this kind of ruffled some feathers for some people. So let's get into a little bit of what was said yesterday. So there are a ton of add-ons that are healthy and valuable and really important for how players play the game, and do rely on the flow of information. Everything from something as simple as damage meters to boss timelines, DBM style. When is the next ability of the boss going to fire? That people have basically been raiding with forever. That's not the computation that WeakAuras gives. That's just a, hey, this ability is going to hit in the next 15 seconds. So Blizzard kind of right away shots at WeakAuras. They don't like them. It's very evident, and they want to restrict the ability of WeakAuras to kind of perform the things that they do. We want to build our own versions of that. I think down the line, we'd love to see a place where there is a boss timeline, which would be amazing, as just as part of the encounter UI, and that's not something you need an add-on for. And that way, we can hopefully eventually get to a point where we really just cut out the WeakAuras that solve the mechanics for you, but not informational stuff that you feel the game should have really been telling you all along, where add-ons are admittedly kind of filling the gaps there. So again, providing the services that add-ons provide without needing the add-ons, but to an extent. They think WeakAuras clearly go too far. Right now, they don't have any specific dates. They are looking into damage meters and nameplate improvements. To me, Plater is a must-have, especially as a tank. You got to, even Mythic Plus, knowing when interrupts need to go off, certain things like that. That's really important stuff. Whether or not I have aggro by the change of the Plater, the nameplates. I think nameplates in WoW are ancient at this point, and do need certainly the updates that Plater offers in the game. And if Blizzard did this, I'd be very happy. They're also looking at raid encounter information that presents and shows to you timelines of possible, events coming up, which would be great. I think we're going to look at all the places where players say right now they need a weak aura, or you need an add-on to be competitive, and ask ourselves, how can we change our game to make that not the case? Now, I'm going to get a little bit more into the weak auras and how they've changed the game and everything else here in a second. But overall, I would not mind weak auras going away. You guys know that I play the game mostly without weak auras. I think I have one right now active for the current raid. It's the one that calls out which target to go after with the bombs for the one-armed bandit, right? It calls out like lightning bomb or flame coin, whatever it is. That one calls it out, and everyone basically feels like they need that one to accomplish the fight correctly. If Blizzard had good callouts, good stuff like that, I would like it. Yeah, and it shows. Well, it's kind of, you know what? You guys can thank me for this, because I've always protested this shit. I always thought if a boss needs a weak aura ability, it's a boss fight that's a poorly designed fight then. We'll take, what's it called? The Dreadlord's fight, for example. You guys remember Sepulchre of the first ones? The whole finding the Dreadlord thing? That whole thing, needing a weak aura to vote, to be able to identify that was complete bullshit. That should have been in the game from the very beginning, and the fact that you needed a weak aura to complete the fight again just means it was a poorly designed fight. Now, getting into kind of the restrictiveness of this stuff, Blizzard really does want to restrict out weak auras. They feel like it's kind of limited them on what they've been able to do in boss fights, and I think it could change the game in a better way once they do this. The single most popular add-on, they go on to say, is damage meters, and I talked about this yesterday. Why isn't Blizzard giving us damage meters? Well, I think he talks about it a little bit here. By like a fair margin, they know that damage meters are the most popular. The majority of players, and the large majority, have damage meters, have the damage meter add-on installed. And so that indicates that people really want to see this information, at least about themselves. Now, this line right here scares me a little bit, because I'm hoping that if they do bring damage meters, that it's not just a visual thing, that other people can in fact see other people's damage. The reason why I feel like Blizzard's always held back on damage meters is they're worried about it breeding toxicity in the game, because you'd be able to kick people based on their damage and stuff like that, and literally Blizzard would be providing you with that information. But the truth is, and Blizzard knows that everybody uses damage meters already. Them holding back on providing it is not stopping people from using it. So, to me, I hope that if they do give us damage meters, which it looks like they're going to, that it's kind of the same shit that we already have, where you could see healing done, damage done by the entire raid, everybody in the raid, and everything else. We definitely want more nuanced measures of success and understanding. Like how successful were you, and how much did you contribute to the run? Highlighting things, now this is interesting, like interrupts and highlighting avoidable damage. So to me, this goes to kind of a mechanics score, right? We talked about this a little bit yesterday in that Marcellian video, where mechanics essentially would be kind of go towards your rating. I would love this. This is what stops people from parsing. If you're rating people based on their ability to not stand in the fire, this is something that could be, used to judge whether or not someone's doing the damn mechanics, or they're just standing there and parsing their asses off. On Rick Reverb, I don't care if someone only has 800k DPS, if the most of it is, what they're doing is into the barrels. I agree, Cadence. Doing the mechanics is a lot of times more important than the damage output. To give a fuller picture of performance. But at the end of the day, I think for someone who's trying a new spec, trying a new talent build, or getting a new trinket, you want to see, this is totally true, you want to see how that affects your performance compared to the last run. This is basically, testing out your build, seeing whether or not flipping a talent here or there, or getting a new trinket or whatever it is actually going to up your DPS or up your healing, things like that. So yeah, of course, people use damage meters for that. That's an important piece of information to have. And I think so, we know that in any world where we were going to limit some of the ability of add-ons, like again, do that real-time combat event tracking, we would need to provide a damage meter solution of our own. I think one of the exciting things is if we do it on our end, we can also be server authoritative. So you're not worried about people being in different phases. We know how that affects DPS meters. And of course, they even talked about augmentation evoker buffs being shown properly. Yeah, of course, Blizzard would be able to do the damage meter right? There wouldn't be any issues with some things showing up that shouldn't. Essentially, Blizzard would be the authority on what shows up on a damage meter. So I would love to see it, love to see Plater, love to see damage meters, and real-time combat events. The attack on weak auras, that was a big thing yesterday. Blizzard saying that they would provide information like DBM provides, with what's coming up next from a boss. But they don't want to be able to provide things like calculative direction during a boss fight. Essentially, giving a player the ability to be brain dead and just follow an arrow or follow a direction provided by WeakAuras that essentially solves the mechanics of the fight for you. If you notice, and they talked about this a little bit, the current boss raid right now, the current raid, Liberation of Undermine, there's a lot of swirlies to avoid, right? There's a lot of mechanics that just involve avoid this, avoid that, don't stand here, go stand here. And Blizzard got into that a little bit yesterday. Ian Hazakosis did in particular. He talked about that. Yeah, okay, that's not something that WeakAuras really solve right now. So that's why they kind of leaned into that mechanic so much, is that they're trying to give us boss fights that WeakAuras are just not going to be the basis of. And that's completely understandable. Essentially, what WeakAuras have done is change the way Blizzard does boss fights. So if Blizzard pulls WeakAuras out of the game, we're going to get boss fights, maybe a bit easier versions of boss fights, right? But boss fights with varying mechanics, so to say, right? Mechanics that would have initially been solved by WeakAuras, but now WeakAuras are gone, so Blizzard can give us those cool mechanics and expect players to solve them. Ian talked about mechanics that would essentially be give you more time to figure them out during the fight, right? So say they want 3 players to split out in 3 directions. There would be less time right now in the current way they build it out, because they know people are just going to use a WeakAuras to do it. Well, they would give us more time to figure things out if they know players themselves are going to have to figure it out. And basically, Blizzard would have more control over the boss fight environment if they eliminate WeakAuras. And they're talking about giving us mechanics, like DBM does, where it doesn't affect the boss fight necessarily, and doesn't do things for you, but it does provide you with a path of what's coming next in the fight, so to say. So that's really good. Limiting what an add-on like a WeakAuras or DBM does and such is people will do the fights that actually count when abilities go off and create a WeakAuras and such. Yeah, and create WeakAuras and such. Well, yeah, eliminating WeakAuras would cause people to pay more attention, for sure. I mean, even the callouts, right? Blizzard talked about, Ian talked about it specifically, the callouts to things, the audio callouts for certain things that WeakAuras will give you, or DBM or whatever. And they talked about actually implementing that into the game. They don't mind callouts for things, audio callouts. Me specifically, you guys know, I don't use any. And what I actually do listen to a lot of times is boss voice lines. If you pay attention to boss voice lines, you'll notice a lot of times they'll have a voice line for before an ability goes off. They'll have a voice line for phase changes. They even have voice lines for when people die. Like will they ridicule a person in the raid for dying? If you really pay attention, there's a lot of bosses that have that kind of voice line. A lot of times I'll listen for it and then look for whoever the fuck just died, right? So it's interesting stuff, but I find that stuff a lot of times in the fights because I don't use WeakAuras to call them out for me. When you're using WeakAuras, oftentimes you miss out on that stuff. So it's immersion breaking a lot of times. So for me personally, eliminating WeakAuras I think is a good thing, as long as they give us a lot of functionality in the game proper. It also creates a less of a barrier to entry, right? People can enter raid and not worry about having to download 15 WeakAuras to be able to do the fight properly. As a pally, I just get wings whenever someone dies. Yeah, well, yeah, you would know. And you look around and say, which idiot was that? And 90% of the time, that idiot was Sam. That's not true. I never fucking die in raid. I'm a blood DK. What's wrong with you? Okay, moving on to this final piece here, the one that was probably the most controversial yesterday. It was the rotation assistant / the one button rotation button, okay? Let's get into this real quick because I think it was way overblown yesterday. But first off, Blizzard wants to introduce 2 things. They're essentially introducing the Hecale add-on, which just kind of highlights your next ability that you should technically click. Now, everybody who already uses this add-on knows it's not always perfect. It doesn't understand situationally sometimes what's about to happen in the fight, why you shouldn't maybe pop your rotation cooldown just yet, holding off on certain things. So player skill still comes into effect here, even if they're showing you what to click next. For example, someone like me, I'll be fighting the boss, right, targeting the boss, and I'll have some ads around me. Now, Soul Reaper is an ability, right, that below 35%, it's going to pop off if you hit somebody with it when it finally ticks down. Well, a lot of times, I'll be targeting the boss, but I'll have side focus on some of the ads around me. And as soon as I see their health drop below 35%, I'll quickly off-target, Soul Reap, and then target back to the boss. A rotation helper is not going to know to do that. It's not going to be able to calculate that out because it's only really focused on what you're currently targeting. Now, they will be able to understand you're in an AoE situation, but to know that you're paying attention to other targets that you're not currently targeting to pop certain things. Those kind of player skill moments are still going to come into effect. And I don't think a lot of people were angry about the Heckley integration because everybody already uses that shit. It's not a big deal. The one that was a big deal was the single button rotation helper, which is essentially a button that you just continually click and it automatically basically clicks a suggested button for you. Libor, thank you for the Prime. 13 months.
Sam will get 50% better with this new one-button rotation helper.
Yeah, thank you. Here's the thing. What the one-button rotation helper will do is it'll raise the floor of player skill. Okay, it's not going to raise the ceiling by any means. And here's what I mean. I watched a little bit of the Asmon reaction yesterday where he was like, oh, the game is dead. That's it. It's over, boys. Look at what happened. The game became so complicated they had to put in a one-button rotation helper. And while the game being a little bit overcomplicated, overbloated with abilities, yeah, it's a 20-year-old game. That's going to happen. And Blizzard can always work on kind of, fixing abilities, pruning things a little bit here and there. But the one-button rotation helper is not going to make you good at the game. Okay, it's not going to, as Libor just said, increase my damage by 50%. It's got a fucking a cooldown on it, okay? At the end of the day, you're not going to be, even if you click it as fast as possible, you're going to be using ability. Like, that's the pace that it's going to go at. At that pace, you're going to fall behind anybody who's doing the rotation manually. Now, will it raise the floor of a player who's just not that good at his rotation yet, hasn't figured anything out yet? Yeah, of course. It'll basically create a baseline of, what, I don't know, what a 12-year-old would be able to do in a rotation kill, maybe. But it's not going to be something that somebody who's really playing the game at an optimal level is going to do. Maybe it'll even help people learn the rotation. That could be another one. But the fact that it's part of a global cooldown, and if you watched them using it in the stream, it was literally you click it and you got to wait. Then you click it and you got to wait. If you're doing your rotation like that right now, you're doing it wrong. Okay. Also, and like I said, my Soul Reaper ability, as I just said, as an example of how I'm paying attention to shit that's not currently targeted by me, that's something that this rotation helper would not be able to help you do. Now, will it be able to help somebody who's really bad at their rotation? Yes. But will that person using the single button add-on ever be able to out DPS or out heal somebody who's manually doing that shit at any level of competency? No, it won't. So Sam's going to go from 100k to 200k DPS. Wonderful. Yeah, so you already see the memes out there. So there's no reason for you to suck then. You'll still kind of suck. With the way that I saw it, you'll still kind of suck. You just won't be complete dead weight. Okay, you'll at least contribute in some manner, shape, or form to the raid. Now, if you're trying to run a Mythic plus 20 with a one-button rotation helper, I promise you that shit's not going to work out for you. So I just think the whole thing was overblown a little bit. People are going to forget about this fucking 2 days after 11.1.7 goes live. People will start to forget about the one-button rotation helper. The only people who are going to know about it are the people Ian rarely referenced in the damn video, which is people who just don't care about doing big dick content. They just want to kind of run around. Maybe Greg from accounting wants to do his delve with one hand, right? Who knows what he's doing with his other hand? His wife certainly isn't helping him in that department, so maybe he's using the one-button rotation helper, okay? Maybe he just wants to kind of quest around and do some lore and other things. Yes, that's a good way to do it. And another thing, guys, if you ever think about porting WoW over to console, maybe a one-button rotation helper would help in that. And just saying, maybe they're thinking about these things down the line. Who knows? But to say that it's going to kill the game or that this is the end of WoW, I think is a bit overzealous there. I love this change. Me personally, I love the Heckley add-in. I think it's great. I love to see it. Anything that eliminates an add-on is a great thing, and people already all use this, so any outrage over this is absolutely ridiculous. You're completely out of touch if you didn't know people were using this add-on. And then the one-button rotation helper is is just raising the floor a little bit. Is not by any means putting somebody into what would you consider a good raid a DPS stance or healing stance. That's it. That is all I have in terms of news.